Now it's time to bind values of the select boxes to every activity object. And we know that all activity objects are stored within activities array that is passed as one of the props to the activities component. And then every object from this array gets passed to activity item component. And as we can see, every activity object stores 3 fields. And one of these fields is seconds to complete property, which should be used as a value for those select boxes. So this value will be passed to base select component. And then once base select component will trigger a select event back to activity item component, this activity item will fire another event to its parent component, and so on, back to the root component, which will update property seconds to complete of the corresponding activity object. So now let's open up activity item component, and this constant seconds to complete, which is currently used as an initial value for the select box, is no longer needed here. So let's remove this constant, and instead we're going to bind value of the seconds to complete property of the activity object to selected prop of base select component. And then when selected value will be changed, this base select component will fire select event. And here we already have a listener registered to handle this event. And we could as easily assign new selected value to seconds to complete property, like this. But we already know that modifying props of components is bad practice. So we only have to modify data in those components where this data is initially declared. And to do this, we need to fire custom event back to parent component. Let's name this event set seconds to complete. And along with this event, we will pass selected value, which we can retrieve by using event variable here. And then let's scroll up to define emits macro and declare new event set seconds to complete. And the validation function will be isNumber, because all values that can be selected by using those select boxes are numbers. And then let's import isNumber function from validators module and remove unused ref function. And of course, after firing custom event from this component, we need to set up a listener in the parent component. So let's switch over to parent component, the activities, and in here, register a new listener for set seconds to complete event. We are going to handle this event by using another local function with the same name, which will accept activity, for which we are selecting value by using that select box. And we can get this activity object by using activity loop variable in here. And as a second argument, let's pass selected value, which, as always, we can grab by using special event variable. And then let's define this new function, set seconds to complete, with 2 parameters, activity and seconds to complete, which is going to fire another custom event. We will call this event set activity seconds to complete, which we will send back to parent component. And parent component in this case is our root component, which should know the activity object for which we're selecting seconds to complete, as well as actual seconds to complete value. So we are going to pass these both pieces of data as separate parameters in here. And before registering listener for this event in a parent component, first of all, let's define validation for this event. So let's define validation function for this event within define emits macro. And since we are passing 2 values with this event, we need to declare 2 parameters and validate every parameter within this function. So firstly, we're gonna validate activity object by using isActivityValid validator function. And another parameter, seconds to complete, should be a number, which we can check by using isNumber function. And then in order for this event to be valid, we need that both of these functions will return true. And we can check that both of these functions will return true by using every method, like so. And after that, we are ready to go to root component, register new listener for set activity seconds to complete event, and we are going to create separate handler function for this event. So in here, let's create that new function, which is going to accept 2 parameters. One of them is activity and another one seconds to complete. So all we have to do within this function is to assign seconds to complete value to the corresponding property of the activity object, like so. And this way we are updating current activity object with the value of seconds that was previously chosen in the select box. But now let's just quickly switch over to validators.js file and export validation function is number, because now we're using this function outside of this module. And then let's group all functions that we export in one place. But there is actually another inconsistency with this select box. And the thing is that we store seconds to complete values within activity objects as seconds. But select boxes themselves use values in minutes. So first of all, what we should do is to make both of these values use the same representation. And to do that, we're gonna have to modify value properties within period select options constant. If before we were using minutes in here, right now we're gonna use seconds. And let's just do it in the following format. We're going to multiply amount of hours by amount of seconds in 1 hour. And this way, we're converting hours into seconds. So first option will correspond to 1 hour, second option will correspond to 2 hours, and so on. Third option will contain 3 hours. And with that, we should also modify labels so that they show correct values. And right now what we see in the browser is that the first select box shows wrong option as selected, because in the first activity object, property seconds to complete stores value 0. And in such cases, select box should show default option as selected. But regarding other two select boxes, they show correct values. Second objects store values of seconds in 1 hour, and the third option stores values of seconds in 2 hours. And we see that corresponding options were selected in the second and third select boxes. And of course, the constant period select options that stores options for select boxes now has value property in seconds in every object. So now we're going to figure out what is wrong with first select box so that it doesn't show correct option. But before that, let's go back to constant.js and modify values of labels. Let's use leading 0 to always represent hour by using 2 digits. So the problem with the first select box is this. In the activity item component, when we pass value to selected prop of base select component, we are referencing seconds to complete property of activity object. But the base select component will show default option only in cases when we're gonna pass null within selected property. So whenever our activity object stores 0 within seconds to complete property, we're not going to pass 0, but instead we will fall back to null, like so that base select component can properly show option by default. And now in the browser we can see that the first select box shows default option, and seconds to complete property of activity object has value of 0. And now it works as expected. So we can continue. Now let's try to reset value of one select box. And right away in a console we're gonna get warning related to validation, saying that event validation failed for event with the name set seconds to complete. And this is happening because when we reset value of the select box, this event variable will store value of null. But as a validation for this event, we use function isNumber, which will allow only numbers to be passed along with this event to parent component. So we're going to provide simple fallback, and whenever event variable will be null, we're going to pass value 0 instead. And this way our validation will be successfully passed. So now, before checking it in the browser, let's go back to the activities component and fix typo in this event. Let's add missing letter T in here, and also import isNumber function from validators module up here. And finally, let's go over all this functionality once again. I'm going to choose first activity item component within Vue Developer Tools. As we can see, seconds to complete property stores value 0 initially, and hence first select box shows default option. And when I'm going to pick another value right away, I'm gonna get another value assigned to this seconds to complete property that corresponds to the option that I have just chosen. And of course, this property will also be updated in activity objects inside of activities array, as we can see in here, within app component, because anytime we select new value in the select box, we are firing custom events to root component, so it can properly update our activity objects. And the same thing happens when we try to reset the value. In this case, we see 0 was assigned, So functionality to update seconds to complete property works as expected.